In a week, Rube, I guess we'll both be driving down to the NovaCare complex to get ready for an exciting night.
Yeah, I think mathematically the odds that we're both driving down right at 3:06 on Thursday, 28th, are probably slim, but at some point we'll both get there.
I don't know if it's slim if we know what time the draft starts and we both have a commute. And I know you like to beat the traffic. I'll try to beat the traffic of rush hour. So I think at 3:07 p.m. next Thursday, I think there's a better than small chance we're both driving.
See, now you know I'm just going to wait till 3:08 to leave the house, just so you're wrong.
Fair enough. This is the Eagle Eye Podcast with Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. Bunch of stuff to get to today. We want to continue our look back at Howie Roseman's drafts. We're up to 2018 and 2019 today. We want to examine the safety position and what the Eagles have there, what they don't have there, what they need to do to fix that. And some takeaways from the pre-draft press conference with Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni, really with Howie Roseman. I think Nick got a question or two just to make sure we didn't forget him. But mostly takeaways from Howie, and we'll get into that in a minute. But first, Drew, I figured we'd start it off with a question that you and I have already been asked a bunch, and it's not going to stop until there's some sort of resolution. But Deebo Samuel has requested a trade out of San Francisco, and I get it. From at its most basic level, Deebo is a very good player at a position the Eagles have a need. Would it be worth it for the Eagles?
Well, and here's the thing about, and I would encourage everybody to read Dave's piece that he wrote today on the whole situation, kind of looking at it from a bunch of different angles, as far as compensation and draft assets and the way he plays the game and all those kind of things. He's a really talented guy. I tend to think that the way to add receiving talent is in the draft. I think they're going to have a chance to land a really good player. They'll have his rights for 5 years in the first round. He'll be on a significant contract as a first round pick, but not $25 million a year. Deebo is going to be a free agent after this coming season. He's under contract for 1 more year, so you don't trade him unless you can sign him to a new deal. You're certainly not going to trade all these picks just to get a guy for 1 year. So there's a lot that goes into it. You look at his durability, his injuries, the way he was used in San Francisco. How sustainable is that? How long can he play being kind of a hybrid receiver runner? You had a great stat in there. What do you have? 53 carries the second half of the season, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's more than Miles Sanders had. I mean, that's like heavy duty. You're not going to last at that rate. And then you look at, that was a big part of his production, half his touchdowns. So I think there's a lot to consider. If it just comes down to, can he help the Eagles? Obviously, he can help the Eagles, but there's a lot to weigh. I think it's too much money, but the real concern for me, because Howie could do it, giving up picks for a guy. He's had 1 great year. He's had injuries, and that you bring in, you bring in an outside guy like that and give him that kind of money. You wonder the ripple effect in your locker room on guys who've been here and worked their way up as playing under rookie contracts. It's a lot of money, and it's a little much for me. We don't know what the compensation would be as far as picks. It would be a lot, and I'm just not ready to do that.
Yeah, I tried to figure out what it would cost in terms of draft picks and then price. So the draft picks, it's nice in a way that the Tyreek Hill thing just went down, because you at least have a loose framework of what both the trade and the compensation after would look like. And I don't know if it would rise to the Tyreek Hill level, but you figure from a draft standpoint, you're going to have to give up one of those first round picks. I don't think you can get him without it. The 49ers they don't want to trade him. So it's going to take that type of offer. And he's such a good player that there are going to be other teams interested. So you're bidding against other teams. So the package would probably look something like, number 18 this year, probably your 3rd round pick this year, probably number 83, the higher one. And then, the day 3 pick here, there, maybe some next year, something like that, just to kind of sprinkle on top. That's significant.
It is. And I just think Howie Roseman's MO right now is more trying to accumulate picks and give them away. If this was a team that was one receiver away from, really being they had, elite young quarterback that you knew was going to be the guy. I mean, there's just so many things that go into it. They have a lot of needs. They have more needs than just let's get another wide receiver and we're going to go to the Super Bowl. So they need, I mean, we'll get into some of their needs, but we all know what they are. And I just think you just can't overpay right now. You just can't overpay. They're not in a cap situation where they can overpay. They have too many needs to overpay. And it's a draft that's really good in wide receivers. I think they're going to have a chance to get a guy who maybe won't be Deebo. Maybe he will, but is going to be cheaper. It's going to be younger. I mean, Deebo, I think, is 26, I believe.
And he's a relatively young 26.
He is a young 26, but you're going to get a guy who's 22, 23. They have under contract at minimum for, not minimum, but at rookie wage scale for 5 years or for 4 years in an option year. So it's intriguing. He's a really talented kid. I'm not saying otherwise. I just think there's some reasons to be careful with this.
Yeah, and for me,
he's going to, 99% of the time, maybe not that high, 90% of the time, these things happen. The guy just resigns. The guy just signs his extension where he is. It's just so much of this is just bargaining and negotiating and posturing. So many times, I remember Phil Anastasia, who the best Eagles beat writer I ever worked with or worked alongside from the Courier Post. Every time there was a contract dispute, he said, you know what? He's going to end up re-signing. And he's, the player and the front office are cursing at each other, screaming at each other, accusing each other of stuff. They're both going to end up on a podium blaming the media for everything. And that's how it always goes. So I think Deebo is going to end up in San Francisco with a new contract. And all of this is just pipe dream. Yeah,
I mean, the difference here, though, or at least the possible difference, is that it doesn't seem like it's all about money here. This is why it gets even weirder, because apparently he's unhappy about the way he was used in San Francisco. But part of the way he was used is what makes him so valuable. Right. I sent myself into a little tailspin this morning writing that piece, because on one hand, yes, that versatility is valuable, and it's what makes Deebo such like a one-of-one type of player. But running backs don't get paid, do they? So if the versatility you offer is as a position that has been devalued by the league for good reason, then what does that do to your value? How does that increase your value if you're saying, you're half receiver, half running? Like, there's a lot of different things to this but I should point out, Deebo's a good receiver. I think that I don't want to make it seem like, and I think some people are making it seem like his only reason he's so valuable is because of his ability as a halfback. And that's not true. Before he started getting the carries this year, he was exceptional. He was averaging 110 yards receiving a game. He's a very good receiver. But like you meant, there's so much to this. And it's not as simple for me as like Christian Kirk. That deal is like, no way I'm paying that. No way for that guy. But this is one where I start and think, all right, well, I mean, he's such a special guy that I'd be more willing to pay Deebo Samuel $25 million a year than Christian Kirk $18 million a year.
Well, the one thing Christian Kirk has is a body of work beyond 1 year. I mean, he's been a really consistent, never been a great elite player, but I think anytime a guy, it's like Stingley, anytime a guy's got 1 year, to me, it's like, what is he really? You just don't know. Christian Kirk, he's had, he gets his 800-900 yards every year, catches 65, 70 balls every year. He's, since he's been in the league, he's a pretty consistent guy. He's never been bad. He's never been great. But Deebo's had one big year. And then injuries are a concern too. I mean, he missed a bunch of games. I think he had a foot injury or an ankle last year. But, I think he missed a bunch of games, like half the season. So yeah, there's no easy answer. If the Eagles made a move I certainly wouldn't criticize him for it. But I just, for me, there's some red flags.
Yeah, I'm not as worried about give me coming off a great year. Like I think he's going to be closer to that than
I'm just saying it's
injuries.
another thing to consider.
Sure, it's definitely something to consider, and that's why it's not as simple as like this guy's really good. You want him on the team because he's really good. It's can you make the money work? Can you make the draft picks work? And one thing that I don't really worry about too much is not that I don't worry about it, but I know people are so focused on, well, this team can't draft receivers, so you're going to put your faith into that. I don't think they can look at it that way,
right?
Because they have to keep trying and trusting their evaluations, and it's going to make for tense moments here. When if they draft a receiver at 15 or 18, we're all going to be wondering, did they just screw this up again? I think that's natural, but I get the idea there, and I get wanting to not pay a ton of money or draft picks, and because if you nail the draft pick, if you draft Justin Jefferson or you draft Jamar Chase, or you draft Deebo Samuel in the second round, you have that guy for a really cheap contract, and he's going to give you at least 4 years of good play.
Right. I think you have to trust Howie can't go into this saying, well, I suck at drafting wide receivers. I got to go sign one for $25 million a year. You can't look at it that way. He's the GM, and he's got to do what's best for the team, what he thinks is best for the team with the advice of his scouts and stuff. And you got to trust your evaluations and believe in your process. And I think it's something I know it's how fans think, because I got like 200 tweets like, they have a better chance of being right with Deebo than they do with a draft pick, which is probably true for any.
But every team does.
Yeah, every team does. But if you're the Eagles, you can't think like that. You gotta do what's best for you and in the long haul. And for me, I think that's drafting a kid.
Yeah. And that was kind of what Howie said in a veiled way, I guess, during his press conference on Wednesday. He was asked about the boom of receiver contracts, and he really liked that term. And he talked about, and I'm paraphrasing here, but zigging when everyone zags and trying to stay ahead of the curve. And you could take it as that's the way they want to build that position, is not throwing money at these guys, but trying to develop them. And like we've mentioned, it hasn't been easy all the time. And I don't even know, you give them credit for making the maneuvering to get Devontae Smith, but as far as just drafting Devontae Smith, pretty safe pick, right? I mean, this was the Heisman Trophy winner. I don't want to discredit them, but when they had a chance to get a good one in the 20s, when they had a chance to get a good one in the second round, they didn't do it.
Yeah. Oh, there's no question. I mean, like you said, I think everyone's going to be skittish until we see the guy in the field and see what he is and what he's all about and see him play. But I'd still rather take my chances that way, and then go get a free agent. That's just how I feel. But I can see the other way, and and it's the money part for me. The draft picks are even more than the money. How we can make the money work, and I'm not crazy about the money, but the draft picks and just the whole building that way, I guess. This team has to build through the draft. They have to keep their picks. They got to get young players all over the board, and I think that should be a priority.
Yeah, and I guess, do you think the quarterback plays a role in that too? Whether or not we think he's here long term, if you have a young quarterback who's maybe not an elite guy, and you might not be a piece away, is that another reason why you're like, all right, well, use the draft picks, build the team, just try to get as many good young players in here as you can? And in a way, it's like a lottery system. The more young players you get in here, the more draft picks you have. You build it that way, and you see what you have, and then you can kind of supplement. Then you say, all right, now we're a piece away.
I don't think there's any question. Yeah, I think you have to think like that, and that's where they are as a team right now. They're a little bit above average, and They can't go into this thinking if we sign Deebo Samuel for $25 million a year, we're going to be a Super Bowl contender, because they won't be. They need safeties, they need corners, they need linebackers, they need pass rushers. They need a tight end. They have a lot of needs here, and Deebo isn't going to put them over the top by himself.
What did you make of Howie's comments? The boom at receivers. Is that the way you took it?
Yeah. I thought I think it was Tim McManus who used that phrase when he asked the question. Tim asked good questions. It was, yeah. And, you see this with different positions at different times that just become the hot position. And it's such a copycat league. And you really have to know when to have restraint when this is all happening around you. Everyone's doing this. It's like, do we really want to spend that much on, a good but not great wide receiver? So I think there's sometimes, sometimes you're going to do that. You're going to open up the checkbook for a free agent, but I do think it makes sense. And this is where Howie is so good with these philosophical, like he's great at the draft other than picking players. Like he's like, and in the first round, I should say. But philosophically, I couldn't agree more that, it just makes a lot of sense.
What else do you think he was getting at there? Because it was an interesting answer. He basically, said it's a copycat league, and I'm paraphrasing again, but we want to be the people who are copied, not the copiers, right? He wants to be the trendsetters. He wants to find new ways to do things. Did you read into that as much as I have? And because I've been trying to think about, like, what does he mean? What's he going after here?
What'd you come up with?
Well, I'll give you what Mike Florio came up with, which I don't think was a bad idea. I don't think it's right, but I don't think it's a bad idea. Basically, that there's been this shift where quarterbacks are getting just crazy money, and he thinks that their idea might be to not prioritize that position as much and really supplement it with other positions and pay them more. I think right now that's just a product of where the Eagles sit at the position. I still think they really value the position, and if they were in a spot where they had a quarterback who needed that type of money, they would do it. Or if they felt like Jalen eventually isn't the answer and they have this player out there, I think they would jump at that. I think that's more of a product of like where they are.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's true as well. I saw somebody tweeted out something about like the 10 highest paid quarterbacks in the league last year based on average annual salary, and none of them made the play. I can't remember exactly what the stat was, but it's still a quarterback driven league. Yeah. You got to have.
I think maybe the part of that is like you don't overpay for a player who's under that elite level. You don't pay if you can pay a Jalen Hurts $5 million, you don't pay Kirk Cousins 20. Or I'm giving numbers that don't.
No, I think that's absolutely true, because if you have Jalen Hurts as your quarterback, you're going to need really, you're going to have to really build around him. If you have Tom Brady, you can pay him $35 million, and who cares who else is out there, because you're going to win 7 Super Bowls. So, yeah, I think if you have a guy who's in between, Kirk Cousins he's going to put up big numbers. He's going to have you in every game. He's going to, make a fortune, but he's not going to win you anything. So now you're devoting all this money to that guy who isn't going to win you a Super Bowl. That's an interesting theory. I think there's something to that.
Yeah, and we have seen them kind of be on the forefront of some trends. I think paying interior defensive linemen has been a big trend in the league, but is that just a product of having Fletcher Cox and wanting to pay that particular player? But I do think they, at a certain point, they looked at it and said, okay, edge play, like the edge market's crazy, but we're looking at it. Defensive tackle can affect the quarterback much quicker if they're elite. And they have this guy, Fletcher Cox, let's pay him a ton of money, make sure he never goes anywhere. It's tough to tell how much they're thinking about really bucking trends as opposed to just going in line with the players they have. Like linebackers is one. It's become a position that's devalued overall in the league, I think. And they've kind of been there with that.
Yeah. Yeah. You look at, yeah, no, I think that's, I think there's something to that, no doubt.
Yeah. We want to go through some of the other stuff from the press conference.
Yeah.
And this is a time of year where every time, Howie opens his mouth, we all have to kind of go, all right, but what's he really mean? Because he's not going to be completely truthful with that. He shouldn't be, honestly. This is smokescreen season. But the first thing we talked about, it was our first chance to talk to him since the trade with the Saints. So we got a chance to explain that. What'd you make of that answer? It was kind of what I expected.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all understand that they're thinking long-term, big picture. Where the Saints, wanted to, they want to do something now. Yeah, it's an interesting trade because of the timing, because when it happened. I thought the one thing that was interesting was, the chart. There's the trade chart is kind of, I guess it's kind of obsolete. It's kind of a guideline.
It's still it's used a little bit.
It's used a little bit. Teams used to really it was the Bible of trades. And Howie's thing was, if it was a good trade for them, it was a good trade for us. We're just going to make it, regardless of what the chart said. Which that's true. But yeah, I mean, it's a move for the long term, and the trade. I mean, the trade itself says that, and he reiterated that we want to spread these picks out, and keep bringing in a pipeline of, in theory, good young players.
He mentioned the fifth-year options too, which is a side of this you don't really think about.
Yeah,
the potential of drafting 3 players who might be on their 5th-year contracts. We're talking 2026. I mean, that's pretty wild. That's as far as this thought process goes, but it's true. I mean, those guys get paid a lot of money if they even end up playing on the 5th-year option, which certainly isn't guaranteed. The Eagles the last few years have had guys play on them, or the last 2 guys they had available to play on them did, but there's no guarantee that would even come to pass.
Yeah.
It's impressive to me that they're thinking like that. If that was a real reason, I don't think that was a guiding reason.
Well, I mean, I know as a franchise, they're. I remember years ago, I was in Howie's office, and I don't think we're allowed in Howie's office anymore. I haven't been in there in years, but he's got a depth chart on the wall for each year, like for 2022, 23, 24, so everyone who's under contract for that year and how it all. So he's always looking at 2025 depth chart. I mean, I just think that's how he's wired. He's just always looking at the big picture, and 2025 is just as important to him as 2022 as far as planning and developing and where's everything kind of fitting together. It's a big puzzle. And again, I think that makes a lot of sense. It doesn't mean he's taking the right players, but philosophically, I just think to have that broad view, that, the long view of that stuff is really important. And yeah, I mean, 2026 sounds so far away, but you got to think about these things.
Yeah, it's wild that even comes up. But then he was asked to follow up about, because he mentioned the flexibility the trade offered them. He was asked to follow up about, does the flexibility at the quarterback position in particular, did that weigh heavily on the decision? He said no. He didn't say no. He just said they love Jalen and they want to build around Jalen. He did not say no. Look, I think the overall flexibility part of that is the most important position on the football team. I wouldn't expect him to say anything else other than they really like Jalen. That's been their talking point all off season, but I'm not completely buying that.
No, and 2 things on that. There's no question that they have to be. I mean, look, we're talking about planning for 2026. They're certainly planning for 2023, and there's some really good quarterbacks, we think, that are going to be in the draft. And we don't know about Jalen Hurts. We just don't. And so to pretend that that's not part of the picture here is silly. It's just, it's not honest. By the same token, I think the Saints trade makes sense, whoever your quarterback is. I think it's a trade Howie would have done, even if he had, young Donovan, 22-year-old Donovan McNabb, and knew he was going to be the guy for the next 10 years. I think you still make that trade. But to pretend that it's not somewhere in the back of his mind that we have some flexibility if we want to move up. If they, who knows, they might not need to move up, but I think it would be silly to pretend that that's not in his mind. It has to be, because that's how he thinks. I mean, because he's always thinking of every eventuality, and that's one of them. We just don't know if this kid's going to be the guy.
Yeah, and it can be. And another part of this is teams can view a draft class differently. The Eagles might like the value, or at least the potential value, of next year's class better than this year's class, at least in that first round. So sometimes teams will differ on that, and we see that all the time. So if the Saints are really high on this year's class and they're like, man, yeah, we want one of those players. We think maybe they love 20 players in this class, and they think, well, we need 2 picks in the top 20 to ensure we get them. And the Eagles are like, well, we don't think there's 3 in the top 20. I mean, that's not worth it to us. That can play a role too.
Yeah. You don't really know the strength of next year's draft because things change so much. But there's no question that the Saints and Eagles are looking at this from completely different lenses, and the opposites kind of came together in the trade. So we'll see how it goes.
How about some other stuff from the press conference? I thought the injury topic was very, very interesting. It was basically looking back at the last 2 players the Eagles have taken who were injured, Sidney Jones in 2017 and Landon Dickerson last year. Howie was asked, like, what did you learn from that? And one of the main tenets of his answer was, well, the earlier a guy gets hurt, the more time we have to study him and learn about the injury.
Yeah, and Landon Dickerson was, several months, I guess probably 3 months ahead of Sidney. When he tore his knee, Sidney, it was a pro day Achilles, and so you have a better idea of the rehab and how it's going and what he's going to be able to do and where he is. You just have a lot more information because he's farther along in the rehab. And plus, I mean, an ACL is generally going to be a lot less complicated than an Achilles. So it was really interesting. There's a lot of really prominent guys in this draft coming off injuries that we just, it makes it hard to evaluate. And it was actually, I mean, it was something I wanted to ask Howie when we got down there was, what's your protocol as far as is the risk worth it with this guy, with this guy, with this guy? And I mean, basically his answer was, the more information you have, the better off you are. So the longer it's been since the injury, but a lot of that's just guesswork. You just don't know. I mean, because the nature of a rehab is nobody knows how it's going to go and how it's going to affect you in the long term. How it's going to affect your ability to run and lift and work out and cardio and all that stuff and stay healthy. So there is an element of risk there. We talked about this the other day. I mean, we both like the Sidney pick. I love the Landon Dickerson pick. If you can get a talent like that, they're going to end up with a Pro Bowl guard in the second round.
Are you sure you liked the Landon Dickerson pick that much when it was made?
Yeah, I wrote it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought we both had some reservations because it wasn't.
I thought it was a risk. I still do, but I thought it was worth it.
Okay. I had more honestly, I had more reservations about Landon at the time than I did about Sidney. Just because Dickerson had this lengthy injury history, whereas Sidney was really a one injury thing. And like I mentioned on the last pod, I don't know for sure that that's why Sidney didn't work.
Right.
There's no way to know that. So that it convolutes it. But it's really funny that, the 2 examples we have in Eagles history, there are some parallels with the 2 biggest injured players of this class. You have an Alabama player who tore his ACL in a game, and then you have another good player who tore his Achilles at his pro day. The 2 players this year, Jameson Williams, the receiver from Alabama, tore in the national championship game. And I mean, he was off to a great state. I think they win that game, by the way, if he stays healthy. And then the other one is David Ojabo from Michigan, who tore his Achilles at his pro day. So if you're going to follow what Howie says and read too much into it, which is our job,
right?
Yes on Williams, no on Ojabo, right?
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Although, again, I think an Achilles with a cornerback is probably a bigger concern than
And that was another thing he brought up. The position matters when you're talking
Yeah.
about specific injuries.
Yeah. But that stuff's fascinating to me. And it was really interesting to hear him talk about that. And I mean, the real answer is you just don't know, but you try to reduce the unknown percentage as much as possible and make the smartest possible decision. I mean, a lot of these guys are coming off something, and there's some people that would make sense for them where they're going to go with these injuries. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
I told you before I did my last mock draft, I almost had them taking Jamison Williams and Andrew Booth, and I was I can't do it, but a lot of the times the value really lines up, and I'm sure they have a specific idea of, all right, if this guy's in this range, it's done. And that was, you asked Howie about, and I'll kind of segue into it. You asked Howie about trades and if they come together quickly or if how, like, what's the process? And he basically said, like, no, like the first round trades are, for the most part, the parameters are already understood. And that's the way it is with a lot of like slotted spots for these players. Like they know if this injured guy is here when we pick it, we're taking him. The value's too good. We're going to take him there. And that's the way it is with trades. They have right now, as we sit here a week before the draft, they know that what it'll take to get up to 8 or what it'll take to get up to 9 or 10, 11. They already have that stuff figured out.
Yeah, that's fascinating to me, the whole process, because you're on the clock for 10 minutes. Well, I think is it 10 minutes or 15 in the first round? It's 10 now, right? You're on the clock for 10 minutes and you're making these decisions that are going to have like this monumental effect on your franchise for the next decade. You're doing it in 10 minutes. So the more legwork you can get done on these trades before the draft even starts, the better off you are. So then if the opportunity comes, you get on the phone, he's like, yeah, you interested in doing this for this? The deal's already done. You have the picks, you have the years, you have everything done. Both teams, are transparent about it. Everyone knows what's going to happen. And you make the trade. You get the info to the league and it's done. If you try to start negotiating in a 10-minute window with the Cowboys last year, you're never going to get it done. So who knows who? And I asked Howie how many trades he has made like before the draft. I don't think he gave a number, but it's got to be a bunch. I mean, there's got to be a bunch of trades that he's got on his desk just ready to go. And he said now in the later rounds, everything's a lot simpler. You're trading a 4 for a 3 next year, whatever it is. It's a lot simpler. You just do it kind of on the spot. But these first round trades can be really complicated. You have assets from a bunch of different drafts and a lot of picks going back and forth, maybe a player. So that stuff is all done. I don't know if other people find that stuff interesting. I really do. I just think I'm so fascinated by the whole mechanism of the draft and how the thing operates and how these teams make these decisions that are going to affect them for forever. And it's interesting to hear him talk because, I mean, nobody makes more than Howie. And you hear him talk about it. He said he thinks other teams do it the same way. They have them all. I mean, you have to really – both teams have to have this done, for it to work before the draft. So, yeah, I just found it really interesting.
Now, do you think if you asked him and he was willing to tell you that he could tell you the parameters of every trade he's worked out, do you think he can remember it?
From memory?
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Like, I wonder, how do you think they keep it organized? Think there's like a spreadsheet?
He's got all scribbled on the back of a napkin. Yeah.
It is fascinating. So the way it normally works is like, all right, last year, the Cowboys, right? The Eagles say, hey, we might want to get up there to 10 if one of these guys is available. In this case, it was Devontae. The Cowboys are going to do that. They can get their guy where you were picking. So then they have to have an idea. All right, obviously you're not going to take our guy. Whoever's at 11, we have to trust won't take our guy, which was the Giants. They ended up trading out. But so it's not just between the two teams that are making the deal. It's about like, okay, first off, we got to get up there because we want a guy. You got to want to get out of there, and you want to get out of there feeling comfortable that you're still going to get the value that you need based on what the teams in the middle are going to do.
And I think a lot of times it's just, there's 3 picks to our pick. There's 3 guys that we feel strongly about that we would take. So if we do this, we know we're going to get someone we really want. I don't think it's always for one particular player. I think maybe
the trade down. Yeah.
Trade down. Yeah. So I think Howie's even spoken about that. We knew we were going to get, so you get an extra pick and you still get someone you really wanted. But, I just wonder, like, things change so quickly. I wonder if there are times where you do have to kind of make it up on the spot, and but it seems like they're just kind of ready for every eventuality.
That would have been a good follow-up. So think about the Andre Dillard year.
Yeah.
Never thought he was going. What were they at, 26 or 25? And they moved up to 22, something like that. 25. They never thought he was going to be available that late. I wonder if they even got that deep into that thought process. But honestly, like, there have been so many trades in the draft in the last 10 to 15 years that I'm sure they at least have some sort of framework with every possible jump.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah. It was good
now,
stuff.
What else stood out? We talked a little bit about
and here's the thing, like, Howie's not going to talk, like he does this every year before the draft. He's not going to give you anything of substance about a position or a player or we need this, or he's just not going to do that. So I don't even.
And if he did, it would be BS anyway.
It would be BS anyway. We used to ask those questions. What do you think of? Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't. It doesn't pay. So we talk to Howie so infrequently that when I have an opportunity to ask him a question, I want to find out something he's going to be honest about, like the process, injuries, those kind of things. He'll be honest about. Where specific players or schools or teams or picks, he won't. So why waste the time asking some dumb question about what do you think of the strength of the tight ends in the third? I mean, he's just not going to tell you. So that's how I approach these things.
Yeah, and like the Donnell Pumphrey pick kind of ruined him too, because he really shies away from talking about positions.
Right.
Yeah, he did talk about the linebackers a little bit. Said he thinks that there's some good value at that position in this draft, but we'll see. He did. So another process question was about psychoanalyzing prospects and how in depth it can be, and how sometimes it's not that in depth. I thought that was an interesting admission that sometimes they don't have to do a deep dive on Devontae Smith. They get it. They know what he is. Everything comes back clean. But then he said there are players that have some red flags in their personal lives or
challenges. I think he didn't say
challenges.
Have some challenges that they're working through. Whatever it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I found that really interesting too. They do this psychological testing. It seemed like they bring in either psychologists. He said people who are trained, we're not trained for this. So they bring in people who are trained to ask these questions.
And there are sports psychologists. And I know that they used to use a few who are trained specifically in that field. And they have sports psychologists. They keep, I don't know if it's on retainer, but they have folks available for the team. Like when we talked about Lane Johnson seeking help, I don't know if he did it through the Eagles or outside, but I know the Eagles have folks available for their players. And I'm assuming some of them, at least some of those exact people or people like that, are then used in the draft process.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. Yeah. And it's got to be hard because these kids are they're prepped so well for anything they're asked, to kind of come across a certain way, come across with high character and loves ball and all that stuff. So I would think it's really kind of a tricky process to really get inside their heads and figure out exactly where they're coming from. What's the issue with them or the potential issue? How much of a concern is it? Because gosh, and how we talked about it, these guys, they're away from home for the first time, most of them. They have money in their pocket for the first time. They're learning a new scheme. They're not around their support system. There's just so many things happening in their lives. And so the draft process is about so much more than just your 40 time and your shuttle time and your, how many reps you do. It's who are you and how are you going to respond to being in the NFL? So I think that's where that comes in. And this is all relatively new. When I mean, I know I'm setting myself up for a one-liner here, but when I started doing this, they didn't do any just psychological testing. It was this guy's fast. Let's draft him, and you end up with some disasters.
Yeah, I mean, the more important the pick, or the more they're investing in the player, the more they're going to do their research. Like back in 16, when they were about to draft a quarterback, I mean, they went deep. They went really deep to try to figure it out. Maybe there's some lessons in that and the process, but the more significant the resources going into the player, the more work they're going to do. And I always think back to Jeff Lurie and people being bothered that he was involved in that process and that he's involved in. He actually has a background in this stuff. He has a master's in psychology. Yeah, let him in the meeting.
Does he really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
And he has a doctorate in social policy. Yeah,
he's an interesting guy.
Yeah.
I had a great chat with him about the movie, about Summer of Soul, a couple weeks ago. Check out that story. Dude won an Oscar award for a movie, which is pretty cool. But anyway,
his third Oscar, by the way.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Great movie.
Anything else from the?
No, I think we covered it all. I think we covered it all.
And Nick was there. He was there, hanging out, not doing much.
I got nothing off Nick. I mean, we talk to Nick all the time.
That's the thing. It's it's not a slight on Nick, but also this is how he's forte. And I think Nick was asked about the process going through it a second time, and he did. That was the one semi-interesting thing that Nick didn't have a lot of answers, but that basically, like him and Gannon right now, like last year, they were still really new in this process of trying to explain exactly what they wanted their players to be. They're watching tape from Indy and right. from Minnesota, from San Diego and LA about like, these are the players we want. This is the type of players we want. Where at least now that groundwork is already down. They can kind of pick up where they left off, which is helpful.
Yeah, and that's a big thing. And it seems like Howie and the scouting department really involves the coaches a lot and getting their input and they're a really important resource for us. And I remember having a long talk after practice one day with Andy Reid up at Lehigh about how the whole NFL model used to be that coaching and scouting were like, they were always, they hated each other. They were like at loggerheads all the time because they didn't trust each other. The coaches wouldn't play the guys that the scouts wanted, and scouts wouldn't draft the guys the coaches wanted. And that was part of like football operations back in the day in like the 70s and 80s. And Andy's thing when he got here was to try to break down those walls and get everybody working together. He's like, this doesn't benefit anybody when scouting and coaching are, they're always in different parts of the building. There was always an adversarial relationship. And, I think one of the reasons Andy had success, really for most of the time he was here was because he was able to, to get both sides of the building, as he called it, to work together. And I think that's the modern NFL model that's what it is. You have to work together. You have to be pulling in the same direction. And I just find that really interesting.
Yeah. And I think you do have to guard against overdrafting players because you think they fit your scheme, because there's a good chance a player they draft next Thursday is going to outlast one of his coaches.
Right.
I think you can't be too specific.
Yeah, that's true. Because 5-year contracts for players are going to outlast a lot of coaches.
Yeah, exactly. All right. We're already way over our allotted time here. We gotta
We don't
get
have it a
this.
lot of time. We can go as long as we want.
I know we're going long. We got to get to safety position.
All right, let's do
because
that.
The Eagles need help there. They have Anthony Harris and they have Marcus Epps. They have Kayvon Wallace. They have Andre Sacheri, and they have Jared Maiden.
Yeah,
they need more. And we saw Rodney McLeod's contract. They let Rodney go, and it wasn't about money. He's getting paid a base minimum salary, $1.77 million this year.
Yeah, they never made Rodney an offer at all. I mean, this is basically about we want to move on from Rodney McLeod more than we don't want to pay him because he got the same amount of money about as a practice squad guy from the Colts. I'm being facetious, but very, very little money. So it makes you wonder, like what they were thinking. They liked Anthony Harris more than Rodney, which I don't really see. Obviously, Harris has a background with Gannon. I don't think he's very good. I just think he's just a guy. And I mean, they're in a position where they've got, and I know Honey Badger's out there. I mean, what are the odds? What are really the odds he's going to come here at this point? He's been on the open market for a while. He's got to be asking for a fortune because nobody's signing him. Maybe teams are going to wait till after the draft, but
at this point, he's probably waiting until after the draft.
It probably makes sense. Although I think he'll just, if the money's right, he'll probably just take it no matter what. But they've got to figure some things out there. And Howie does have a history of trading for defensive backs late, like during the summer and into training camp. And I think Epps was actually a mid-year waiver claim, I believe, a couple of years ago. Darby. I mean, there's been guys, but the cupboard's bare. And I like Epps as a piece, but I certainly don't want him playing every down. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's better than I think, but I think he's okay. Kayvon has had opportunities here and there to play, and he's been okay, but been hurt a lot. Certainly hasn't given us any reason to believe he's the guy moving forward. The other guys, I mean, Andre Sacheri is a special teamer. Jared Maiden, I don't know anything about him.
Bama guy.
He's on practice squad. He played against the Cowboys that last day of the season, and it's a little scary. And then when you combine that with corner, where they lost Steven Nelson, and you have Slade back, and he's going to be looking around saying, like, who's going to be out here with me?
Yeah, it's fair. I was just on a conference call with Daniel Jeremiah from NFL Network. He was asked about the safety position as it pertains to the Eagles, and said, if they could get Kyle Hamilton in the first round, it's a home run. I mean, it would be – he's the type of player who would be worth me never writing again that they didn't draft a safety in the first round.
Well, you get so many different senses of where he's going to go and how high you'd have to go up to get him. I don't really know what the answer is. 1 week, he's climbing up. He's going to be the number 2. Next week, he's drifting down. I mean, nobody knows. So I look, if you had a chance to get him, I would do that. I would move up and get him. I think he's going to be a hell of a pro. But I just don't know how realistic that is and how high you'd have to go to get him. Yeah.
And I mean, there are players who are going to go in the second round who are pretty highly rated safeties. The problem is there going to be one at 51 where you're going to have to trade up. I mean, Lewis Seen from Georgia could end up in the first round. Jaquan Brisker from Penn State is probably a second round pick. Your guy, Jalen Petrie from Baylor, is a second round pick. Your guy. And you have, Nick Cross is probably a third round pick. There are players out there, and I think they'll have an opportunity to get one. But I feel like we talk so much about corner that sometimes we lose sight of the safety position. That might be a better value in the second round than a corner.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. But even so, like, even if a guy like say it's Brisker, who I think has some tools. Now you're talking about Anthony Harris and a rookie second round pick is going to, and then I guess Epps is in the mix maybe, but you go from Malcolm and Rodney being together for 5 years to Anthony Harris and a second round rookie and Marcus Epps. That's a big concern for me.
Yeah, but if we're talking about they need to build through the draft,
Yeah, no, I agree. But I mean, I'd still be okay with having Rodney play this year and having the rookie, kind of learn and wait his turn and maybe mix in as the year goes along. They might not have that luxury.
yeah, I mean, if they draft one in the second round, I think he's starting day one.
He's going to have to.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the two drafts we want to talk about: 2018 and 2019.
At least they're short.
They're short, yeah. It's a good day to run long because 10 players total in these two drafts. 2018, pretty good. 2019, we'll talk about it. 2018, it was the year they had number 32 overall. They traded down, eventually traded back up, and they got Dallas Goedert with the 49th pick, and it's proving to be a very good pick.
Yeah, they're pretty good at drafting tight ends. I guess the last three that they've drafted in any round. No, I guess three of the last four are Selleck, Ertz, and Goddard, and I think the kid from Florida was in there in the late round.
Cornelius Ingram.
Cornelius Ingram, but
didn't they draft Clay Harbor?
Yeah, you're right. He was just tweeting to me. Isn't that weird? But yeah, Goddard. I mean, I think Goddard is. I think they nailed back-to-back. Ertz and Goddard are just two great second-round safeties, tight ends. I'm really curious to see what kind of year Goddard has this year. He'll have a full year without Ertz. I think he's going to be a Pro Bowl guy this year. He's that good. That was a hell of a pick.
Yeah, and the numbers will be better, but the blocking really matters, especially if they're going to still be a heavy run team. Maybe not as heavy as we saw last year, but they're going to run the ball a lot. He can help you. There aren't many guys who are that gifted athletically and who are tough enough to block. I mean, honestly, he's like George Kittle light.
Yeah,
I don't want to say he's George Kittle. He's probably the best tight end in the league, but he plays a lot like Kittle.
Kelsey's better than Kittle because Kelsey's out there. Kittle gets hurt a lot. Goddard doesn't. Goddard's usually, he does here and there, but I think I would say Kelsey's the best tight end in the league. But in any case,
not really.
I think Goddard's the top 5 tight end.
I do too.
Andrews, Kittle, Kelsey. The kid in Atlanta is a hell of a talent.
Pitts, Waller, who's really
I think Goddard's right in that.
Waller's more of a receiver than a.
Yeah, but when you take into account the blocking, he's easily a top 10, and in 5 to 7 range.
Yeah. And we probably forgot some of the tight ends. Please don't tweet at us. Tweet at Reuben, actually. He likes it. Round 4, and they go a long time here. They have one pick in the first 124 picks. So this is the year, if they screwed everything up, you'd be like, all right, you didn't have many chances. This ended up being their best draft. In the 4th round, they took Avonte Maddox at 125. And then 5 picks later, they took Josh Sweat at 130.
Yeah, maybe the whole key is giving Howie like a pick every other round, so he's got more time to prepare.
Well, we'll talk about that in 2019 in a second.
Yeah, but yeah, and Avonte Maddox finally got settled in the slot where he should be, and played really well last year. And like Goddard, he's got a new contract, and like Sweat, they all got new contracts, and made a lot out of not a lot of. I mean, one pick in the first 3 rounds and had a hell of a draft.
And I give them credit for drafting Josh Sweat in the 4th round because there was risk there with that knee. It was, I mean, he was a supreme talent in high school, had a just devastating knee injury. It's something everyone talked about it like a chronic condition. He played all right at Florida State, and he had the projectable size and ability. He really had a redshirt season as a rookie. They put him on IR after like 6 weeks, and he was okay. They didn't need to put him on IR. They needed him to get bigger and stronger. You give him credit for coming back, but you give the organization credit for taking a flyer on a player in a year where they didn't have many flyers to give.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And made a Pro Bowl last year. I don't really look at him as a Pro Bowl player, but I look at him as a very good 4th round pick.
Yeah. And then they get into the sixth round. They take Matt Pryor at 206. And say what you want about Matt Pryor, wasn't a great pro here, but he was a player. He's an NFL player, and they got him in the sixth round.
Yeah, and he got him through some games here and there. He really looked like, you'd see him at training camp with his pads on him. He looked like a stud, and he was just a huge guy, but he just never really. A sixth-round pick, you can't complain. He's still in the league. I think he's with the Colts, I believe.
Colts, they traded him there.
Yeah, that's right. And
they got something for him.
Yeah, so good for him. He's versatile. He can play guard and tackle, and fortunately, he's not here anymore.
Yeah, and then the
backups are better.
Round.
Their backups are better than Matt Pryor.
And then the seventh round, the Eagles didn't have a seventh-round pick.
Right.
They went back into the seventh at 233 overall to draft Jordan Mailata, and this is like the best draft pick ever. This is insane.
Yeah. They might have gotten an all-pro left tackle with the 233rd pick in the draft. Rip on Howie all you want for the first round busts, and he deserves it, but a creative pick, and it wasn't just Howie. Stout had a lot to do with it. They deserve so much credit for inventing a player, really inventing it, like Frankenstein. They just kind of, took a guy who had never played football. And I've said this before. I remember watching his very first practice rep at his very first rookie OTA, and he didn't even know how to get in a set. They
had to help him get his helmet on.
He didn't, and to go from that to where he is now, it's really an incredible story. And they deserve, they try to be creative sometimes with guys, whether it's, just trying to find guys in different places in different ways. It's tough to do that, but man, he certainly paid off big time. Seventh round pick.
Yeah. Overall, that's a fantastic draft class.
Hell of a draft class, considering they didn't have a 1, a 3, or a 5. They had 2 4s.
Yeah. And they end up with 4 players they extended during the season last year. Pretty wild.
Yeah. So that was a good one. Unlike.
All right. Well, yeah. 2019, first round, they slid up a few spots to draft Andre Dillard, who is a weird player because right now he's not we don't think he's a good NFL player, but we all think he might still have a chance to be a good NFL player.
Yeah, I guess he's got a chance. Yeah. I think he can be a average starting tackle for somebody. I'm not sure he can, but I think he probably can. It's hard to tell what his ceiling is. I think he's kind of in his head a little too much, thinks too much instead of just going out there and mauling people. But it's not going to. I still think they're going to trade him. He'll be in the league for a long time. He'll bounce around. He'll start some games. But as a 22nd pick, it's just not a good pick.
Yeah, it wasn't. And who knows what would have happened? I mean, he was supposed to be the starting left tackle in 2020, and then he got hurt. It was a biceps injury. He was out for the year. Who knows? I mean, maybe he would have played well that year. We have no idea. And then it ended up being JP got his money and went out and played left tackle. But and then last year he comes into a competition with Jordan Mailata that Mailata wrapped up in the first week. It was
first rep. Yeah, I remember I wanted to write close. The first day that Mailata has a job one. You wouldn't let me. I was like, it's over after the first day of practice. You're like, you just wait like a week. No, it's not.
It's good to have a training camp battle to talk about every day. I didn't want you to declare it over. But it was definitely, everyone saw it. It wasn't a contest. And then the second round, the Eagles ended up with 2 second-round picks. They used number 53 overall on Miles Sanders and number 57 overall on J.J. Arcega-Whiteside.
Yeah, and Miles has had a weird career, I guess. I mean, he's done some really good things. He's never really had a stretch, like a really productive stretch, where he's been an elite player for like 6-8 weeks in a row. I mean, he just gets hurt a lot. The production's always there. He's got one of the highest averages in NFL history, like a career 5.2 or 5.1 or something. But, and I think where they got him, that's where you want to draft a running back, middle of the second round. It'll be interesting to see what happens, what his future is, if they're going to re-sign him, if they replace him, if they believe in him. He's in that same position that those guys Goddard, Maddox, and Sweat and Bellata were in last year, going into year 4 as a second-round pick, going into free agency. So I like the player. His receiving has dropped off, which is kind of alarming. Didn't score a touchdown. I think he had the most carries in NFL history without a rushing touchdown, well, which is another weird thing, but Jalen would score all the touchdowns. Hurts, that is, not Rager.
I think,
but a good pick. Good player.
I don't know if it's a good pick yet. I don't know if the production's been good enough to say it's a good pick. I think it's been an average pick.
I think it's a good pick because you can see the talent is there. It's a matter of managing it and keeping him healthy. I mean, the injuries are to me are the biggest concern with him. I know he can play. If he can play 16 games, he's going to get you, or 17 games, he's going to get you 1,200 yards and average between 4.8 and 5.2. He just hasn't been able to do that. So
which is a part of it.
It is, but as far as the pick, I think it made sense where they picked him. He didn't play a lot in college, so you figured he would have a longer shelf life than like Saquon maybe, which we're seeing, his teammate. I thought it was a B pick. Give it a B.
Okay.
Now,
how about
the next guy, I probably wouldn't give a B.
Yeah. At the time though, I fault the Eagles with the Rager pick so much, and we'll get to that next week. And I fault them with some of these picks, the Marcus Smith, I crush them for, because they went against the grain and it blew up in their face. When they drafted JJ, for the most part, people thought that was in the range.
Absolutely. I thought he was going to be really good. I watched him, and he had the size, he had good enough speed. Came from a really productive, great program, really intelligent kid, hard worker. I mean, he had all the individual components. He just kept dropping the ball. It's like, that's a big part of playing that position. And I was really wrong about him. I thought he was going to be really good.
Yeah, his inability to separate has.
But I thought he was going to be able to use his wingspan for go up and high point balls and just jump over, make plays that way. But
it's a different animal doing that in college and doing it in the pros.
Sure. Yeah, no doubt. But I mean, he has gotten open.
At times
when he's open, he just drops the ball. Yeah. It's not good. He's a wide receiver.
It's getting worse because they didn't have a 3rd round pick. And then in the 4th round, a late 4th round pick, I'll give you that, 138 overall, draft the local kid. I went to Penn State, Sharif Miller. Never played.
He played 1 snap.
Yeah.
He played 1 snap on special teams.
Yeah.
And they brought him back. Didn't they bring him back at one point on the practice squad? I think. But 4th round, you want a guy who's going to at least, be on the team at some point, play some special teams, spot starter, give you something, rotational guy. 4th round, you're not expecting a guy who just never plays. So that was a disaster. I think it's tough drafting a guy in his hometown. I think it's tough situation, expectations, your friends, how come you're not playing, what's going on?
Yeah. It's not like he went anywhere else and had success. So
no, I totally agree. I'm not, I'm certainly not making an excuse for him, but I think it was a tough situation. And he's, I'm not sure he was confident enough to really handle that whole thing. And
I think he's in the USFL now, along with their next pick. It's not a good sign when we're talking about their players in the lower league. The last one, the 5th round pick, it was their last pick of this draft, 167 overall. The quarterback factory goes to Northwestern and gets Clayton Thorson.
Yeah, that did not go well.
He was so bad that year that I couldn't even gain anything out of third team reps watching them, like for the other players.
Yeah, it was shocking how bad he was. And like you see guys like they'll bring in a camp arm just to say, just to have that extra quarterback to throw reps, just so the regulars don't overuse their arm. They're undrafted guys. They bounced around. This is a 5th round pick. You'd expect him to be able to at least get the ball where he wants to put it. He was as bad. I mean, he wasn't as bad as any quarterback I've seen, because I'm not going to mention any names, but yeah.
He was up there.
As far as draft picks, as far as drafted quarterbacks, he might be the worst one I've ever seen.
Yeah, it was a bad sign when Mike Rowe was asked about him early on. He said, "Oh, he's big." Yeah, you need more than that.
Yeah, that was one of Mike's memorable interviews.
Yeah, anything else?
No.
All right, let's wrap this up. Next week, the draft is here. We can't wait for it. If you enjoy the Eagle Eye podcast, please do us a favor, rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, please click the like button and subscribe there as well. We appreciate all of you. For Reuben, I'm Dave. We'll talk to you next time.